Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time in your day to join us. Today's session is on the basics of remediating an inaccessible PDF. It's going to be recorded for future on-demand viewing. A Q&A pod is going to appear here on the left for you to send us any questions that you might have. Also, in the top right corner, you'll see some arrows, and you can click on those to move the presentation into full screen mode. At this time, I'd like to turn things over to our presenter, Rob Haverty. Rob, over to you.
Thank you very much, Lori. As many of you may recall that we're on the one webinar 2 weeks ago. My name is Rob Haverty, and I am a product manager in our Document Cloud and Accessibility. I focus primarily on PDF, so I work with products like Acrobat and InDesign for making sure that it is easy to create accessible PDFs and that the products themselves are accessible. We're going to go fairly quickly today, so I doubt I'll have time to get to questions, although Lori will be monitoring that if there are ones about the broadcast. I will try to follow up afterwards. I apologize to those of you who sent me questions after the last webinar. It's been a rough couple weeks and I'm a little behind, but I'll be getting caught up in the next week or so, so you can expect to see responses. So today we're going to talk about the basics of fixing a PDF. Last time we sort of did an intro on how to set up Acrobat Pro DC. Most of what we're doing will be focusing on Acrobat Pro DC. I will give you information if you're using previous versions, but in all honesty, the workflow is simpler in Acrobat Pro DC. So if you missed last week's presentation, you can view the recording on that. We also will be repeating this series every quarter, so if you do happen to miss one, you can catch it the next quarter. Typically, each webinar builds on the previous ones, so you will want to watch the recordings before coming into the next webinar. So I'm going to share my screen now. And predominantly everything that I will be doing will be in Acrobat Pro DC itself, but let's walk through a couple slides to get started. So there's some overarching things that you need to know when you are working on PDFs and remediating them for accessibility. Now for myself, I tend to work almost exclusively in the tag tree. And one of the reasons I do that is because the PDF UA standard actually says that the content shall be tagged in the logical reading order. So I want to make sure that my tag tree is right. I also personally find it easier to work within the tag tree. Some of you may be working in other panels, the content panel, the order panel, and that's perfectly fine too. And I don't want to suggest to anyone that this is the only way to do it. You will hear me say probably multiple times that at heart I am essentially a lazy person and I try to find the shortest path to success. So I think what I will be demoing today is what I consider to be the shortest path. There are some things that you need to be aware of regardless of where the document is coming from or what version of Acrobat you're in when you're working with a PDF. Some of the things that pretty much today always need fixing, you're going to have to look at your tables. There are things that you need to fix in the tables, and we'll go through the basics of tables this time around. Also figures. I just make it a good practice to always check my alt text for my figures. Artifacts. There may be some garbage tags that you're going to need to think about artifacting, depending upon the source document and how someone actually created their original document. And then lists. A basic simple list, which we will go through today, typically, if it's been created correctly in the source document, is going to be pretty well tagged. However, not always. People don't always create lists correctly. And then when you have more complex lists, there is some extra work that needs to be done. Things to think about as far as the source document. A scanned document which is coming up in a subsequent webinar, requires extra work and at the outset in order to get your document ready for you to actually tag it. Role mapping. Some source documents will create custom tags, and in that case you actually need to map those tags to standard PDF UA tags. If you have a tag that is not structured exactly the way that PDF UA says it needs to be structured, then it is not a PDF UA tag, and a screen reader or other assistive technology is unlikely to be able to read that information the way it has been tagged. It will probably read the information, but it will not necessarily know the structure relating to that information. Links, you need to pay attention to your links. And then form fields, and we actually have 2 webinars on form fields later on in this series. Remember from last time that your results are going to differ depending upon the source document and how you have converted that PDF. And so good to know all those details, and that will help you kind of know these are the things I'm going to need to look for in my documents. All right, so I'm actually going to skip that slide, and we're going to just jump straight in now to into PDF. And we're actually going to start in Word. So let me find my actual document. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about headings. Now, in PDF UA, it is required that headings be in a hierarchy. In the correct hierarchy. You need to start with a heading 1, and it must be followed by a heading 2. It cannot be followed directly by a heading 4, for example. As we talked about last week, or 2 weeks ago, the source document is really important for this. And if we look at this source document, one of the things that I have found frequently in people creating documents is they may use styles for the headings, but they use them for the visual appeal and not for the actual heading. So in this case, if we look at this first heading, we'll notice that the person used a heading 4 because they thought, oh, italics are cool. I'm going to make that my top-level heading. Well, it's not, because it's actually a heading 4. So if we leave the Word document, and we go into Acrobat and go into that same document, and we open our tag tree by clicking on the luggage tag over on the left, we're going to notice that that very first tag is an H4 or heading 4 because that's what we told it to be in Word. And so it came across exactly what we told we wanted it to be. Very simple to fix this. If I know that I want it to be a heading 1, I can put focus on the tag, and I have a couple of options here. I can double-click to get into editing it, and I can change that 4 to a 1, and now I have an H1 tag. Now you'll notice it does not change the visual layout of the document. That's not the purpose of this. We never touch the actual visual layout within a document when we're making it accessible. So let's go down to that next one, which is an H5, and you can't have an H1 followed by an H5. It needs to be an H2. I can, instead of double-clicking, I can also use F2 to give focus to that. Now, if for some reason I don't know, and I can change that then to my H2. But let's say I don't know what the actual formatting is supposed to be. In this case, we've kind of are given, it's an capital H and a number, but let's say I don't know. So I can actually right-click on this, go down to the properties at the bottom of the context menu, and in the tag tab for my properties, you'll notice I have type, and I can go in and select, oh, I want that to be a heading level 2. I can close that, and you'll notice that it automatically made that an H2. So if you don't know that a list is a capital L or a table is spelled out with a capital T and then lowercase able. If you don't know those things, that's okay. There's a way for you to find that out by going into the properties and just letting it auto-create that for you. So this is pretty simple. Easy way to fix a tag. If you've got a tag that is wrong, you just select it and then change that tag, or you right-click and go to Properties and find the right tag type in the drop-down. All right, we're going to close out of that one. That's a simple exercise. Go to our next one. We're going to spend a lot of time in this document. So this is, all these documents are available to you. They've all been uploaded, both the exercises as well as the solution documents, so you can go in and practice and you can check against the solution to see if you've tagged these things correctly. So let's take a look at this document. And I've done pretty much everything I can do wrong in this document. So open the tag tree. The first thing I always do is open the tag tree, and I'm going to look at my document. So when I select the very top level tag, you'll notice that I get blue boxes around all of the items in the document. If I have items that don't have those blue boxes, it means they are not tagged. Stay tuned. I believe we're changing the color of this because as we get further down, you're going to notice the blue box doesn't really show up very well around images, which typically have like a black border. So we're changing the color, so don't be surprised in the next couple of releases if all of a sudden it's not blue and it's a bright fuchsia, which I think is the color we've chosen, which is going to be more visible. And then I can arrow down the tag tree, and you'll notice that I can see each individual item. H1 for my first heading, great. There's a paragraph. There's an H2 for my next level heading. There's a paragraph. There's an H3 for my next level heading, which says it's a list of Canadian provinces by population. And then I go down and I get a P or a paragraph tag. Well, we've got a problem. The person who created this, me, didn't use list styles. Instead, they used indenting in order to create the list. And so when a screen reader gets to it, it will read this, but it will not read it as a list, and so you will not get the structural information. So we need to fix that. And the first thing we need to do is we need to add a list tag. And when you add a tag into the tag tree, it always adds below the tag that has focus. So I'm going to go up to the H3. I'm going to right-click, or I can go up to the context menu. Pretty much every time I say right-click, I tend to be a pretty keyboard-centric. You can also go up to the context menu, the drop-down menu to the left of the eye with the circle. But I'm going to, again, I'm on here. I'm lazy. I want to do things as quickly as possible. I'm going to right-click. And I'm going to say I want a new tag right here at the top of the context menu. And then I get a dialog, and it says, well, what kind of tag do you want? And I'm going to scroll down and find list. I want a list tag. Don't need a title. There are sometimes reasons why you put titles in, but you don't need a title, so we're going to leave that blank. And we're going to say OK. And you're going to notice that the list tag got added below the H3 where I wanted it. Also notice the focus jumped back up to the top of the tag tree. That's a bug. I would like it to actually either stay on the H3 or, if possible, move to the L tag. Stay tuned for that fix. All right, so then I go to my L tag, and that's great. Now, I need to have all of the items in that list in the L tag. And I need to do two things with it. First of all, I need to make those all list items. And secondly, I need to move them as a child of the L tag or the list tag. So I'm going to select the first P tag, which should be a list item tag. And then I'm going to down arrow, hold the Shift key and down arrow to select all of those. And I can watch, I kind of split my vision between selecting the tags and making sure I'm getting blue boxes around everything I want over in the document itself. So one of the great things that we've added is you now can bulk edit tags. Before you would have to have gone in manually each individual one and made them all an LI tag. I can select them all. I can right click. I go into the properties dialog like we did with the heading, and I change this to a list item. And I didn't need to know, you look over here on the left, you'll see that all those got changed to capital L, capital I. I didn't need to know that that was what the tag type was. Now, you'll notice I've already got them all selected. You can drag and drop them under the L tag. I'm not particularly good at drag and drop, so I like to use cut and paste. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to cut all of those, and I'm going to select the L tag, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste as a child. And now we have a list with all of the associated list items underneath it. Now you'll notice when I expand one of those list items, it has the content directly in the list item. And this is perfectly fine. The screen reader will read it correctly. It is an appropriate tag structure for PDF UA. You may add a label tag and an L body tag if you want to, but in this case, we don't even have a label. There's no bullet, there's no numbers, so there's nothing to add there. I could add the L body tag, but it's kind of unnecessary extra work because there's nothing else there. So I would leave this exactly as it is now. It's simple and it is clean. And so we're done with that list. Now, a little later on this morning, assuming we have time, we're going to get to a little bit more complex lists. But I want to make sure you have the basics. So now we've talked about lists. We've talked about adding a tag, changing tags, and then moving tags into their correct place in the tag tree. So we're going to collapse that, and we're going to keep going down our tag tree. And now we're at artifacts. I'm going to scroll a little bit further down in the document here to bring that up in the middle. So now we're looking at artifacts. So an artifact is essentially something that you don't want read and doesn't have any real value other than maybe decorative or formatting that is not valuable formatting information. And so you don't want artifacts, you don't want those things in your tag tree. So when you turn something into an artifact, depending upon how you do it, it will remove it from the tag tree automatically. I'm going to show you the way that I am confident always removes it from the tag tree. There are other ways that you can do it, and sometimes you will find that it will not remove it from the tag tree. We're going to talk specifically about that when we talk about images. So as I continue down, you'll notice I've got my paragraph tag. Now I have a P tag for a blank line. Next paragraph tag, another P tag for a blank line, next paragraph tag, and so on. All right, so I've got a number of these blank lines here. They're not the end of the world, but they're annoying because the screen reader is going to read them as blank. So it will read the information and go blank, and then read the information and go blank. Not the end of the world. However, sometimes people will use blank lines and carriage returns like that to push something down to a second page. And you may have 20 of those. And so when you're reading it, perhaps with a screen reader, you may get to that in here, blank, 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 and think, oh, I must be at the end of the document, when in reality you have a bunch more to go. So you want to avoid blank lines. You want to use paragraph styles when you're in Word. If you have not, it is great to artifact these. So how do we artifact those? The best way to do that is using the reading order tool. Now, you may remember it as touch-up reading order. We've renamed that as just reading order. And you may also remember that you could go to the order panel, which is the Z order icon on the left, select the drop-down menu up to the left of the eye with the circle and select Show Reading Order Panel, and now you have your reading order panel. Way too many steps for me, and because I prefer to live in the tag tree and I can see exactly what's going on in the tag tree, we've added direct access to the reading order panel from the tag tree. So I can select the tag that I want to artifact, and there's that empty space. It's got a blue box around it. I can right-click, and I can select reading order or hit the letter X. We're adding hotkeys, so you'll start seeing those coming in. And now I have my reading order panel open. The reason I like to do it this way is sometimes things within the document, in the content, will get layered or kind of next to each other, and these identifying numbers will get stacked or layered upon each other. By having selected this P first, I've got my little blue box, and I know exactly which number I care about. So number 18, I need to artifact. When I select it, you'll notice that the buttons on the reading order tool will become active. So I select number 18. Whoops, I missed. I selected 19. There we go. And they're now active. Now, I'm going to kind of split your vision here, and we'll do this more than once so you can see. We're going to click on the background artifact. You'll notice that the number 18 will shift down to where 19 is now, and you will notice that this P tag will disappear. So if you can keep kind of all that in focus, I'm going to click on the background artifact. Sure enough, the number 18 shifted down. I'm going to close out of this for a moment. I'm going to go back into my tag tree, and you'll notice that it skips now directly down to the next content. So it's gone. This is the one way that I can always be assured that when I artifact something, it removes it from the tag tree. So it is my favorite method. I can also bulk select by holding the Control key. Let's see, I need to make sure I've got the right, whoops, I didn't want to do that. Make sure I got the right one, so it'd be that one and that one. So I hit the Control key and I can select more than one. And I can right-click, go into my order panel. Didn't really need to select them in the tag tree, but I then can select my number 19, hold down the Control key, select number 21, and I can artifact both of those at the same time. Ran into a problem there. 20 didn't disappear. All right, so somehow I missed that, but then I can just go back and do it again. Likewise, I know 21 needs to go away. I don't always have to select the tag tree first. I can just look at it and know, oh, I need to get rid of that 21. Looks like I've got a blank space here, which is now 21 also. We'll get rid of that. So we're getting rid of those, and you can see now, I'm going to close out of that for the moment. You can see in the tag tree that it now skips all of those. So when an assistive technology gets to it, it will read directly through paragraph by paragraph with no intermediate steps. All right, so now let's take a look at images. And this is a little bit controversial. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see that image. All right, this can be a little bit controversial. In my worldview, not all images need alt text if they have captions. If the caption provides all of the information that I want communicated by that image, then I'm going to artifact the image and have it just read the caption. So let's take a look at that. So I've selected the figure, and as you kind of can't see, you've got the little blue box around this. But because it's a dark figure, I really can't see it very well. So that's why we're changing the color of that. I can go through the same step of right-clicking on the figure, select the reading order tool, select the number associated with that image, and background artifact it. And now this is out of the reading order. So what will happen is when we go down the tag tree, it will read the paragraph, preceding the image, and then it will say, Figure 1, my dog with his goofy grin. Now, if that caption did not say Figure 1, might be confusing and might be a reason to have alt text. But in this case, it gives all the information that I need it to give. There's a figure, there's an image, and the image is of my dog with his goofy grin. Don't care that he is a Border Collie Lab mix, that there's a towel on the floor behind him, that he's sitting in my family room. None of that is interesting. All I really wanted to point out was that my dog has a goofy grin. So to me, this is a case where I'm going to artifact an image. Now let's scroll down to the next image. And here we have a black bear standing in my driveway, and the caption says, a new neighbor comes to visit. Well, that's not really very informative because it doesn't tell me whether it is a new family moved in next door and their kids have come over, or the whole family's come over, or somebody's cat's in my yard. I don't know anything. So that's kind of a nonsensical caption, at least with relation to what the image is conveying. So in this case, I'm going to right-click on that figure, and I'm going to go to Properties, and in the Tag tab, you'll notice I have an alternate text box, and I'm going to put in the alternate text for the image, and in this case I said, black bear standing in our driveway on a sunny afternoon. Now, some people may argue that sunny afternoon is unnecessary in the alt text. However, I live in Seattle, so sunny afternoons are really important to us. Therefore, I've included it in my alt text. Artifacting, pretty simple. The challenge becomes when you have a lot to do. And sometimes it may be that you need to go fix it in the Word document first or in the source document, so that you don't have to artifact quite so much. All right, we're going to make this a little bit smaller, and we're going to jump down to tables. Now, again, when you're working with tables, you need to get into the table editor. And we did that last session to talk about how to set up the table editor. You have two options here. You can go the route of the order panel and go into the reading order panel and select the table and then select the table editor, which again is a lot of steps. And if you're using an older version, you know how difficult it is because I swear there was like a 4-pixel square somewhere over here to the left of table that I had to select. And again, I like to see what's going on in my tag tree. So I can just select table in the tag tree, right-click, table editor or hotkey Q, and I'm directly in my table editor. This is awesome. All right, so let's take a look. Let's take a step back, and let's take a look at our Word document. Oh, I don't have the Word document open for that. Sorry, folks. There we go. Take a look at our Word document. So I want to show you something that has changed in Word, even though this is not a class on Word accessibility. Well, let's go down to our table. Now, it used to be in the old days in Word that, or previous versions of Word, that in order to get the top row as column headers, you had to select repeat header row. Don't do that anymore. Now when we are in our table, so I've selected my table, you'll notice that I've got two new things. I've got my table section in the ribbon tabs, and I have design and layout. If I select design, I have the choice of header row, which is saying that I want the first row to be column headers. And then I have first column, which would make my first column row headers. I can also select last column as row headers if I have a table that is done that way. So by selecting these, and I'm going to close that, I now get to a table that already has the column headers and the row headers identified. So if I go into one of these header cells, and I know that because I have my color that tells me that that's my header color. I can also go into my table editor options and say show cell type, and then I see my THs and my TDs. Go back into the table editor options. Again, to get to that, we select a cell in the table, we right-click, and we select table editor options. I'm going to turn that off for right now because I want to see the text. Go back into selecting a cell, right-click on that cell, and now we want to go into the cell properties. And you'll notice that it is a header cell, which is what we want it to be, because we told it in Word that it was a header cell. The problem is it doesn't tell you what type of header cell. Now, screen readers typically, when they get to a table that has header cells that does not have a scope, it will assume that they are all column headers. So if it's a column header, not the end of the world if I don't put the scope in, but to be clean, I should say that that's a column. Say OK. Now I can bulk edit these, hold down the Shift key and select them. Right-click, table cell properties, and select column. Go into sedans, right-click, table cell properties, and sure enough, column got picked up. So that's great. So if we didn't do this, now we're going to do this for the row headers, which is where it's really important. Because if we don't do it for a row header, if we're in, let's say, the far bottom right column where there's the number 7, it would read trucks, color, ruby red, midnight black, triple yellow, 7. Because it's going to assume these are all column headers, and they're not. So if I go in, and I can do the same thing, I can select all 3, right-click, table cell properties, scope is row. I'm going to say OK. Now when I get down to here, it'll say trucks, color, triple yellow, 7. Let's just go back into the triple yellow, select, right-click, table cell properties, and sure enough, we got our row scope. So today, regardless of the table and where it's come from, you're going to need to go in and set the scope on your header cells. I'm working on getting a change in since we know from Word, at least from Word, we know whether those are column headers or row headers, being able to do that. But today we can't. All right, so that's the basics, the first part of tables. Now let's look at a little bit more complex table. So I'm going to go down in my tag tree and select the table that relates to the next table, table tag. And I'm going to right-click and go into my table editor. Now we have several things going on here. So first of all, I have merged header cells. Now back in the old days, this was really frowned upon from an accessibility standpoint. The reality is that we've gotten good enough with the tagging, and screen readers have gotten good enough that it's not the end of the world if you have merged cells. But you do need to identify them correctly as a merged cell. Now we also have in this table, we have some nested cell header cells. So January, February, March, all the months, those should also be header cells. Today, there's no way in a source document to identify nested header cells. And so when this converts, there's no way for us to know if that's a header cell or a data cell. And so anytime you have a table with nested header cells, and they can get very ugly, you need to go in and manually fix those. So let's start with that. We know that these need to be header cells. So I'm going to select January, hold down my Shift key, and I'm only going to do the first 6 months. For demo, right-click, go to my table cell properties, make that a header cell, and those are column headers. So I will say column and say OK. And now we know those have changed to header cells. Now we have this merged header cell that is above the month cells. So we need to make that a merged cell. So if we select that first quarter, right-click, go into Table Cell Properties. This is kind of the thing. Actually, I'm going to move some stuff around here. Let's slide this down. Go, so I have room. All right, so we're going to select that first quarter, right-click, Table Cell Properties. Now we have to talk about the span. All right, so the first thing I need to do is I need to change the scope. It's a column header, and it's a column that spans 3 columns. So I need to change the column span to 3. I'm going to say OK. Basically, merged cells are horrible. You're a horrible person because you're using merged header cells, and I just have to accept the fact that, okay, yes, I am. There's no way to dismiss this. You will get this every time you do a merge cell, and you just kind of have to accept it and say yes. So now we'll notice that the color changed because, again, in my table editor options, I chose this color for my merged header cells, and I checked that I wanted those shown. And so now I can go through and I can do the other ones. And again, I can bulk select by holding down the Shift key and right-clicking. Go into my table cell properties. These are all column, and they all have a column span of 3. And then I have them all. Now, if they don't all have exactly the same number of column spans, you can't bulk edit these. So you may have some where there are 2 columns under it and some where there are 4 columns under it. Those will need to be done individually. And then again, of course, I'm going to need to go to my row headers, select all those, right-click, table cell properties, and make sure my scope on those is row. So in the solutions document, this is all done correctly, but this gives you the steps that you need in order to correctly identify merged header cells to make sure that this table is correctly tagged for the screen reader or for the assistive technology. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about images. So there's a couple of things. Let's go down to my first one here. And again, you can't really see the blue box around it. Unfortunately, I did all sunset photos, so it makes it a little harder to tell which is which, but we're in the very first one. And I can manually go in and right-click and select the properties and fill in my alternate text. And in this case, I probably would want it to be sunset with clouds, we'll say. Whoops. Have to spell. There we go. All right. Now I can do that, but that's cumbersome. The faster way to do this is to go into the accessibility tool, and you'll remember we added this to the tools panel in the previous webinar. So I'm going to go to my, if you don't have it in the tools panel, you can just go back to tools, to the tools tab and find it down in the tools. But I've got it in my tools panel. I can expand that so I can see that it also on hover comes up with accessibility. So I'm going to select the accessibility tool, and we're going to notice partway down there, about 3/4 of the way down, is set alternate text. So I'm going to select that. And this is going to say this will detect all the figures in the document. Do you want to do that? I can dismiss this one if I want to. I don't because I use this for demo, but you can dismiss this so you never show it again. So it's like, yeah, I want to select them all. Why wouldn't I? And out of here to give myself more room at this time because of modal dialogue. And you'll notice the first one it found was the black bear standing in my driveway because artifacted. So it is no longer a figure in the tag tree. So this one is fine. I like this. So let's go to the next one. Now, don't choose Save and Close once you've typed in your text because that'll close the dialog. Up here in the top, there are arrows, little teeny tiny arrows that allow you to move from image to image, forward and back. So I move to the next image. Now let's say I decide that, well, you know what, I really wanted to artifact this one. And there's this cool little checkbox here that says decorative figure. And I know enough about accessibility and the web to know that decorative figures are usually considered figures that I don't want, I don't need information on, I don't need alt text for. So, if I choose that, will it artifact it? Well, it will, but it won't necessarily. In fact, in most cases, it won't remove it from the tag tree. So you're going to end up with a messed up tag tree. So currently, I don't use this method. I go through my document first, and I artifact all the figures that I don't want to have alt text, and then I go to this tool. We need to fix that. Obviously, that's a bug. It would be a perfect world if I could just click this, and it would automatically remove it from the tag tree. So that one has its alt text. I can go to the next one, and I can say this is sunset through a wine glass, and I can go on and continue to fix my alt text that way. So we're going to assume I'm done, and I have finished all my alt text, and I can close out of that tool. So there you have many of the basics, and this is all covered in this one document. So when you're looking at it, you can go through and work on these things. So I'm going to close that one. No, I'm not going to save my changes. And I'm going to go into links. Now, you may recall from the session 2 weeks ago that we had this hierarchy of tasks. And one of the things was making sure that your links are correct in your document, your source document, before, or they're correct in the PDF before tagging them. So there are essentially 3 different types of links. And depending upon the type of link that is used, you may or may not have issues in the tagging. So the 3 links, we have embedded links. In this case, the link is actually part of the text. This is considered the best approach for accessibility, although sometimes it's not possible. The next one is a short URL, where we just start with www. And the next one is the full URL. In the case of the short and the full URLs, you need to add alt text to those. The PDF UA standard also requires, so if you're going to actually be testing using the PAC3 tool and you want to make sure that you are 100% PDF UA compliant, you will need to add alt text to embedded links as well. It won't read it twice. It'll only read the information once. It's just I find it annoying to have to add alt text to something that I've already done the right thing by making it an embedded link. But if you're running that tool, you will fail if you don't add alt text to the embedded links. So when I have done it in Word correctly, and I look at my tag tree, we will notice as I go down, let's find there's our embedded link. We will have a paragraph tag with the text, and then the link, and the link text, and then a link OBJR. If you do not have the link OBJR or object reference, you do not have a correct link tag. So you need to make sure that you have that. When we get into forms, we're going to talk a lot about unmarked annotations, and so I won't go into that too much today, depending on time. So this was great. All done right in Word, came over correctly, everything was fine. So let's go into the actual Word document. And let's say that instead of using the Acrobat tool or using Save As in Word to convert it to a PDF, I did print. Now you may recall from last time, print is going to give you an untagged PDF. So if I do print, I'll get an untagged PDF. Let's go back into, instead of doing it that way, let's go back into Acrobat. And there's something that you can do here in the tag tree. If you really are unhappy with your tags, you might want to try running the tagger that is built into Acrobat instead of the tags you got on conversion. You'll remember from the previous webinar that there are two different engines and they're looking at things differently. The one from Word is coming across looking at the structure that Word gives us. The one in Acrobat is guessing. It's looking at the structure that you have. So to get rid of all my tags, I can select tags at the very top, right-click, and say Delete Tag. And now this is going to be just like if I had used print and I'd brought it in with no tags. Now, the first thing I'm going to do whenever I do a major step like that, like deleting tags, or I typically would have done it when I was working through that document, when I finished my table, or when I've done my images or done my artifacting, I'm going to want to save. Now in this case, I'm going to do a save as because I don't want to write over my exercise document. And so I just append it with delete. I didn't spell right, but that's okay, so that I know to get rid of that. All right, so now visually it looks like I have my 3 links in here. But let's see what happens when I tag it. 2 ways you can do this. You can go back into the accessibility tool and you can select auto tag document. Again, I'm lazy. I live in the tag tree. I'm going to select no tags available. I'm going to right click and I'm going to say add tags to document. Go back down to my tag tree and I've got my tags in my document. Notice it mistagged this. It was a light blue, and so we kind of guessed it. It's really not dark enough to look like an H1. It's the first tag in a document. We probably should, by default, make that an H1. Well, let's get down to, and then we missed this altogether as a heading, because it was too small and too light. Let's look at this link now. So if we look into the link here, you're going to notice we have our checkout hour. We have a style span and a link, and the link OBJR. And you'll notice that the text for the link and the link OBJR are different. That's okay, as long as you have it in this, the link followed by the link OBJR and the text for the link. So because that link came over from, because I had that link originally in my document and I just deleted my tags here, it remembered. So that link was actually a link. It kind of saved that metadata. So it didn't do it exactly like print. So if you have a document where you want to do work in it before you tag it, you might want to bring it over, and it has links, bring it over tagged, and it will remember that information so that this gets tagged correctly. If I go down to this next one, we'll see we've got the same thing. We have our style span, and then we have our link, and everything is correct. So if I'd gone back to my Word document, and let's do the file, and we're going to print, and we're going to print PDF. I'm going to say print. Save. I go into my tag tree, no tags, because I did print. Select that, right click. Whoops, don't want to do that. Add tags to document. Now let's see what happened. Did a different job here, which is interesting. But we get to our style span, which is really the underscore, and we're going to see there is no link because it didn't know that this was not just underscored text, because it didn't bring over in the print process of an untagged PDF, it didn't bring over that link information. However, if we go down to the next one, because it is a short URL, it actually found the link and made it into a link automatically. So what we have to do is we have to make this a link and then get it tagged. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to collapse that for a minute, give myself a little more room. I want to go into the Edit tool, Edit PDF, and I can actually collapse that part of the Edit tool because I don't care about it. And I want to go up here where it says Links. Now, in my screen, it just says LI because I have my font pretty big, but it has a little chain link. And I'm going to select that, and I'm going to want to add or edit a web or document link. And when I select that, I get a little crosshairs that you can see. I'm moving it around at the top of the page. I'm going to go down to that link, and you want to make sure you select the entire thing. And as I drag it across, I am selecting it in blue. And it's going to give me some options. I don't want a rectangle, so I want that invisible. It should open a web page. It's going to say next. And I'm going to enter the URL, and I only have to enter the short URL. So I can do www.adobe.com/accessibility. And I'm going to say OK. Now I have the link, but I need to tag that link because it's still not in the tag tree. And just to show you, when you have things like that that are untagged, they will show up as an error in the accessibility checker. So let's go to the accessibility checker. Again, you find it in the accessibility tool in the tools pane on the right. I'm going to find full check, select that, leave the checkboxes as they are. We talked about this last time. Start checking. And I got a bunch of issues. But let's find the one that we care about here, which is tagged annotations. So when you have untagged text in there, and in this case, that link is not tagged yet, you will get a tagged annotation fails. And I can select element 1, and it will show me, yep, that's the one that failed. So to fix that, I go to my tag tree, and the first thing I want to do is put focus whenever I'm working on untagged annotations or unmarked annotations. I put focus on my tag tree at the very top of the tag tree. I'm going to right click. I'm going to do a find. A find dialog will show up, and I want to find unmarked annotations. That untagged, unmarked, same thing. And I'm going to say, and I want to search, typically I just search my whole document. I'm going to say find. And you'll notice I've got a blue box around that. So I'm going to say tag the element, and I want to tag it as a link. I'm going to say OK. You'll notice it put that tag at the very bottom of the tag tree. So I need to go and find, there we are, find where it belongs. And in this case, it belongs in my style span as a child. And so I'm going to take it and I can drag and drop it, or in my case, I'm going to cut and paste, right-click, select it, right-click, cut, go to the style span, right-click, and paste it as a child. And then I have my link with my link OBJR, with my link text, all in the right place. So long way to go about fixing this if you didn't bring it over from Word already tagged and don't have your links done correctly in the source document. Okay. The last thing I want to look at briefly is complex lists. And when I talk about complex lists, I mean where we have nested bullets. We may have extra paragraphs where you have a list item that actually has more than one paragraph in it. So if we look at this in the tag tree, and I go to my first list, you're going to notice that in this document, this is one solid list, top to bottom. But it's broken out because it assumed these paragraphs were not part of the list. And so we have to fix that. So I have my list, and it has a list item with its list body. And in that, under that, nested under that, I have another list with a list item with its list body. It doesn't have the labels, that's okay. And then another list body. Now this paragraph actually belongs as a peer of this first list body. So I want it to read all of this stuff in the list. So I need to move that. And this is where it sometimes gets a little bit tricky. So I want this to be after the sublist, but at the same level as this L body. And cut and pasting is a little bit difficult there. We're going to try to drag and drop and see if I can get it to the right place. Nope, I did not. All right, I didn't. I'm going to use Control-Z to undo. Get it back to where I was. All right, there's my list. There's my list item. There's my list body. I want this one. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to cut. I'm going to paste it as a peer. I'm not going to work exactly. So it did work. All right, so there we go. All right, so I pasted as a peer of this list body, and I'm going to change this to another L body. You will get mixed opinions on this, but what I effectively have is I have two L bodies that are separated by a sublist in here. And so I'm going to make it an L body. You could leave it a paragraph. It's still going to read correctly, but it really is part of that first list item body content. So now I have my L body, and then nested in that first L body is I have another list with two list items as children. And then I have another L body that is still part of that same list item. So this gets a little confusing. And as you go through, you need to move each of these things. So I could collapse that. I've got my next list, which has a list item in it, which actually belongs as part of this first list and should be a peer of that first list item. I'm going to right-click, cut, go to there, right-click, paste, and now I'm starting to see my list form with each of my list items in it. We are at time. I want to quickly go back to the slide deck and just highlight the fact that at the very bottom of the slide deck are some links and resources and my email and some other resources. Feel free to email me with your questions, with challenging documents. We are always looking to improve. So I thank you again for attending our second webinar in this series. And the next one coming up, I believe, is on complex tables. It might be scanned documents. I've forgotten which order. But it's either complex tables or scanned documents. It's out on the page for the webinars, so you can see what's coming up. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Rob. Everybody can feel free to continue asking any questions you might have in the Q&A pod. But at this point, we're going to go ahead and conclude the audio portion of today's session. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again in 2 weeks.